Hi, thanks for tuning in. Today we have a special present to open. We have a CRX, but before we get to that, I'd like to remind you, please like, subscribe, ring the notification bell to get notified when we upload more videos, and leave us comments down below. Let us know what you'd like to see, what you'd like to see less of, and any comments or questions if you have them. Let's get started. Let's start unpacking this thing. As you may have noticed by the slam on the desk, it's awfully heavy. I'd consider that a good sign. Right on top, we've got 2 rolls of filament. Not sure what brand they are. I know the CR10 came with CC tree filament, I think. There's no indicators on here other than PLA, 1.75 millimeter, and kind of a batch number. We've got a box of accessories. And this will be the gantry here. Some padding behind the lead screws. We'll come back to that in a minute. The bed material here seems interesting. It's like a slightly textured glass or ceramic plate. And we don't want this to really slide around back and forth quickly. There we go. So that's all there is to it. Looks like one of the leveling wheels fell off the bed in shipping. There we go. All right. Let's get some of this plastic film off. Take those clips off in a second. So this feels nice and sturdy. It's relatively heavy, and instead of having the control box, we now have everything integrated into the base unit. There's some tape over, looks like the Z-axis stepper motor connector cables, kind of stopping them from falling back into the unit. There's also the Z-min limit switch connector here. They're also labeled in the traditional Creality style with these little orange tags to remind you what they are. There's 2020 rails for the Y. There's 2 of those. And the belt, instead of being in this kind of an orientation, it's sideways like this. Still a standard GT2 6mm belt. And there's some nice Creality 3D branding, CRX on the front, and a touchscreen. And we have a ribbon cable, which is reminiscent of like a D9, maybe 20 pins or so. So we'll come back to that in a sec. Let's open up this box of accessories, see what's in there. We've got a scraper. We have 2 of your typical Creality style brackets for the spool holders and the other components for the spool holder. You've got a power cord, of course. You've got your Allen keys, your wrenches, flathead screwdriver, snips, your little nozzle cleaning tool. Another bag with screws, the nuts for the filament holders, Looks like a couple extra parts, an extra nozzle. You've got the Bowden couplers. You've got a USB adapter to read a micro SD card and a micro SD card in there. We'll dump all those out. And this micro SD card is a NetHack, so basically unbranded, 8 GB micro SD card. Power cord and 2 extra lengths of PTFE tube, Bowden tube. So actually, before I start attaching the uprights to the base here, I've noticed that the glass surface has shifted. Either it was assembled that way or shifted in transit. So they've got a different mechanism for holding down the glass surface to the aluminum bed. Instead of like your typical binder clips, there's these little pinch clips that are on a hinge. So they've got a little tab and you hinge them out. The back ones look to be double screwed in, so they don't hinge at all. So I'm going to guess that I would slide this forward out of those clips. Yep. So I'm just shimmying it sideways until it's square. And then get rid of this plastic residue. And if I slide it forward, there, it's popped out of the back clips, so I can get the plastic out of there. There we go. I was a little impatient initially and just ripped the plastic out. So I'll slide it back so that it's underneath the rear clips, square it up, and then slide those back on. This has an interesting texture to it. It's kind of like a checkered, dimpled texture. We'll get a close-up shot of that. But it is, looks nice. Hopefully it's flat. Just looking at a reflection, it looks flat. I'll throw a straight edge on there and confirm that, because that's historically been a bit of a problem with the glass and or the beds on some of the larger Creality printers. So now we'll take this upright here, obviously with the extruder facing the rear. Just line that up with the cutouts. Kind of drops right into place. Make sure you're not sitting on top of the connectors for the Z-axis motors. There we go. And the easiest way I find to do this is to hang one side of the printer off the edge of the table and screw upwards from underneath. These look like M5 by 30 or so. I'm going to need my Allen key. Just going to dump this one out as well. So many bags. Good. So very carefully, I will slide this entire assembly sideways and off the back. There we go. And then I'm not going to screw them until they're extremely tight. I'm just going to snug them up so that it's not wobbling around anymore. This is a little awkward because there's kind of deep, large holes that you have to aim the screws through. You can't really see what you're doing. And they're not like constrained, they're not narrowly drilled holes. They're probably 3 times as large as the screw threads. So they kind of flop around in there. I'd hate to have one fall off the Allen key as I'm screwing it in here. It'll be lost in the control box somewhere. It appears as though the base of the control box unscrews and slides off to access the electronics inside. Not going to do that at this time. I just want to get it up and running and start playing with it a little bit, but I will definitely open it up and take a look around. I want to make sure I'm not pinching this ribbon cable. I do like that they've wrapped the ribbon cable in a kind of fabric material. At the very least, it's black and it'll blend in with the rest of the assembly. Unlike a rainbow colored or silver ribbon cable. I was just noticing that the Z-axis motors are screwed right through the vertical extrusion, the 40-20 extrusion. Rather than using T-nuts, everything seems to be threaded. There we go. Just gonna kind of see that as square as I can get it on both sides. Okay. I tightened that side all the way once I was sure that everything was square. I'm just coming back and tightening this one now. All right. So let's tackle the easy things first. On this side, in here, there's two cables in this little hole. It's probably kind of hard to see. The smaller one is obviously the Z-limit end switch, which is attached to this bracket. And then the larger one will go to the motor itself. There's not a whole lot of clearance here, so I'll kind of move the bed back and forth to make the space. And unlike before with the CR10 and CR10S, S4, S5, you don't have that box, so you're not always kind of fighting with having enough cable length to place the box where you want and reach all the components it needs to reach. Everything's got exactly the amount of length it needs. It's kind of nice that it's all contained in the box. I guess I might be a little concerned if you were putting this in an enclosure, because now all of your electronics are in the enclosure as well, where having a separate box kind of allowed you to have that external. And then the ribbon cable connects here. There's these two little arms that move out and in, and it's keyed. Make sure you're putting it in the right way. Slide that in, and those arms will kind of latch on to hold it in securely so it can't accidentally wiggle free or come loose. There's a lot of lubricant on the Z screws. I'm gonna check that the couplers are also tight. I'll probably give them an extra torque to make sure. They've still got the standard style slotted top bearing pieces to allow some play in the lead screws. We'll get some close up of some of these things as well. And I'm noticing that this lead screw is actually higher than this one, which likely just means that they're seated into the couplers different depths. So we could correct that if we want. As long as they're held onto the couplers securely, that's not really a huge concern. The Y-limit end switch is already connected and it's routed inside the control box. It's a nice kind of clean look. Let's start getting the spool holders attached. So I'm quickly going to assemble the spool holders. I'm going to put one on each side on the top. And when I mount the spools on them, I'm going to mount the spools so that they unwind this way, because they're going to go into the sides of the extruders like this. So I've got the spool holders assembled with the T-nuts loosely threaded on. Slide them into the extrusion, make sure that they turn and engage, and tighten them up. I may adjust exactly where I place these later, but I'll put them pretty close to the ends for now. Okay. So another thing I've noticed right away, before we go too much further, is on the extruder, the hole leading in is much larger. That's so that you can fit a piece of PTFE tubing in there and extend that beyond the lead screw, so you don't have the filament dragging or collecting the grease off the lead screw as it goes in. So make sure But before we're done, we'll snip a couple pieces of that. So now we don't have to worry about printing any kind of filament guides or anything like that. I'll just do the same on this side. These levers are both anodized aluminum. These appear to be aluminum, which I know they've kind of flip-flopped between plastic and aluminum. There we go. I'm just moving it slowly, just to see that there's no dead spots. Make sure that it's not loose, which it is. So we'll have to raise that up. And the bottom wheel has an eccentric nut. We'll want to tighten that to make sure that there's no slop in the X carriage there. And then there is an eccentric nut on both of the inside wheels on the Z-axis. So if there's not enough contact between all the wheels there, we may want to adjust those. These are all extremely loose, so we'll have some adjusting to do there. That'll be easiest once we get it powered on, so we can use the motors to move the X-axis, or Z-axis, sorry, up, the X gantry up. I've already unwrapped the first spool because I was a little bit impatient and excited. I'm going to feed it in that PTFE tube. And I've always found these a little tricky to get it to line up with the second hole in the aluminum lever bracket piece. I'll just feed that up until it goes right near the hot end there. Let's open the second one. So the first one I kind of opened in haste without realizing that it has a resealable bag, which is kind of nice. So tear it across that line and we can use this bag to keep it nice and dry. We'll keep the silica gel in there for later. It's kind of a nice feature. I happen to have a dry box, but many don't. That's a nice option to have. So I kind of cut this on a 45 just to make steering it in a little bit easier. There we go. And I'll feed that one until it goes at least into just the top of the hot end there. Okay, now let's turn it on. There's the Creality logo, and it is a color screen with a welcome jingle of sorts. All right, let's start navigating through these menus and take a look around. Okay, so on the screen we have the hotbed temperature, which is 20 degrees. It's currently set to 0. And the hot end, or the nozzle temperature, 19 or so degrees, set to 0. But we're in Chinese, so maybe gear, probably settings. There's an E here. English, okay. Let's go back, that's much better. So now I want to move the X gantry up, so I want to move the Z axis up so that I can access the eccentric nut on the bottom of the X carriage. All right, so now I've got the X carriage raised, or the Z axis raised. This bottom wheel has an eccentric nut on it. And I can use this to turn and apply more pressure to the rail so that there's less slop. There we go. So now it's good and firm. And if I move any one wheel, they all move, they're all contacting the rail. Move it gently. I have the motors disabled on the screen. You wouldn't want to do this with the motors enabled. You actually wouldn't be able to, it would be fighting against you. That looks good. So we know X works, Z works, and let's just quickly check the Y. If I move it. Good. And if we do home, does a little jingle. It shows you kind of an XYZ cube here, and it's homing. So that was our initial build of the CRX by Creality 3D. I can't wait to get my hands on this, play with it a little bit. We'll go through a bed leveling routine. We'll start slicing with the dual color extrusion, and more follow-up prints and videos. Remember, like and subscribe, and click the bell to get notified when we upload more content like videos about the CRX. Thanks for watching.